Hi, I'm Stargate Pioneer from Better Podcasting, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we're a bunch of geeks talking about geeky things. Each week we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Steven.
But what if I'm in the mood for a T-Swift story?
Chris.
I've heard the X is going to give it to you.
And SP.
That's how we roll on Gonna Geek on Monday night. We get crazy!
Gonna Geek Productions presents the official GonnaGeek.com show.
Hello and welcome to episode 231 of the official GonnaGeek.com show. My name is Steven John Drew, and with me, of course, is Chris Farrell.
Good evening, everyone.
We also have Stargate Pioneer, also known as SP. Just call him SP. That's his line.
It is, and this time I'm going to say I hate daylight savings time. Oh my gosh, that is such a robbery in the spring.
Well, I don't hate daylight savings time. I hate daylight saving time.
What have you got against eco-friendly light?
Also,
Everything.
I'm pleased to say we do have a special guest today. You've seen him on the show before. He is known as the Better John Drew. It is my brother, David. Welcome, David, to another episode of the GonnaGeek.com show. I don't know what you did to get punished, but we appreciate you being here.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me.
So for those of you not familiar with David, David is a retiree podcaster. He used to podcast many, many years ago. He's part of the OGs, I think is the official name. And so, David, what did you used to do when you were in the world of podcasting / streaming? Because that was also a fun little endeavor you did.
Well, I used to be a host and producer on the Galactic Water Cooler Network, which was a series of podcasts that started out talking about Battlestar Galactica, went on to talk about tech news, fitness. And obviously, I wasn't on the fitness show, but and a few other stuff. But we were audio podcast, OG, audio guys, AG. So we did not make the transition to video.
Well, it was probably better that way because video is a pain in the butt, as all of us will tell. Now, here's the fun story. For those of you not familiar with Chris, Chris actually started in video. That was where he did. He went all in right at the beginning on Hangouts on Air, right, Chris?
Originally, we were actually Twitch, and then we were having issues with that because technical issues. And then we went to Hangouts on Air. About 3 weeks into the podcast, that's when Hangouts on Air went live. And I was like, oh, wait. This is the easy way to get live streaming on YouTube. And we went that way for probably the next 150 episodes.
Well, if you're not familiar with All Things Good and Nerdy, that's the show that Chris is talking about. You should definitely check them out because they are indeed on the Gonna Geek Network. The Gonna Geek Network has a bunch of awesome podcasts, and you should definitely check those out. All Things Good and Nerdy usually streams live on Sundays at 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. What time is that in Eastern?
11?
11. No, it's later. Yeah, later. It streams on Sundays. Just wait all morning from the moment you wake up, and you'll eventually see it start streaming on Geeks.live. Right, Chris?
That's the exact way to do it. And if you're lucky, you might even catch the replay on Geeks.live before the actual episode starts.
Awesome. By the way, speaking of ways that you can catch things, not that way. I am pleased to say that you can now catch us on iHeartRadio. That's right. As of 2:05 p.m. Pacific time today, I got the official acceptance email that you can now find us on the podcast section of iHeartRadio. So there you go. You can find us there, even though you probably don't want to find us anywhere else because you're already listening to us.
That's great. So when are you going to catch up and do like Spotify and on the Amazon personal assistant?
I'm sure it'll show up eventually. And don't get me started on the Amazon personal assistant, which takes us perfectly into the news. Yes, indeed. We're going to talk about the Amazon because, well, for those of you who have Amazon smart speakers, you might want to go ahead and mute them right now because we're bound to slip up. It's bound to happen. Make sure you mute it. They're eventually going to say the word Echo, and so we don't want to go ahead and trip them up. But yes, there's a couple of points that came out of the Amazon Alexa World Echo Amazon. Is that all the trigger words? Computer. Is there any other, Chris?
I don't think so.
No,
I think
okay.
you've literally
I
triggered all possibilities.
I thought "Hey You" was in there now too.
No, that's just how your wife talks to you.
Oh, that would explain things.
Yeah, I get that.
But seriously, there was a couple weird things that came out of the world of Echo this past weekend, and number one was that it started to randomly laugh at people. Yeah, if you hadn't heard about that, apparently the Amazon Alexa devices started to laugh at random times, and the laugh was a little bit creepy, to be perfectly honest. Now, Amazon said that what it was it was accidentally somehow misinterpreting the phrase Alexa laugh, to which she was programmed to just respond. Some people said it happened in the middle of the night. Some people said that it just happened at random times, but they did decide to make a change to stop this. And now the way that it will actually answer, you have to say, Alexa, can you laugh? To which she will no longer just instantly laugh. She will respond and say, of course I can, before laughing. Now, the funny thing about that was when I first heard about this happening, instantly I went to try it on mine. And actually, that was what I did, was without even reading that article about the patch that was coming, I thought this has to be a trigger word. So I said, Alexa, laugh. She did not laugh. And then I said, Alexa, can you laugh? And then she said, of course I can, and then responded. So obviously, by the time I heard about this whole thing, my unit or my count had been patched. And definitely does not randomly laugh. The laugh is still a little bit weird, but yeah, apparently she was laughing in random houses, and it would have creeped me out. It creeps me out when SP randomly laughs in my house.
So you have denied that Alexa has been laughing in your house?
Yeah, nobody would laugh in my house when I'm around.
Oh, that's true.
That's
everybody
fair.
laughs at you, but not with you. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, we usually do it behind your back, actually.
Absolutely.
Also true.
Audio listener, I turned my back. That's what happened there.
By the way, I have discovered that the Amazon voice assistant does have a boyfriend.
What? Really?
Yeah, if you give her the command, did you have a good day? She rotates through about 5, 6, 7 different ones, but she does state that she has a boyfriend who is a car.
What car?
It's just a self-driving car. I don't know which one.
Okay, so next on the Alexa news there, also, they have announced a new feature. They're trying to make it a little bit more interactive, and this is something that is definitely needed. If you've ever looked at how Amazon compares to the Google version, which, by the way, our guest today, David, actually owns the Google Home infrastructure, and the Google Homes are a little bit more interactive, and what they're doing with the Amazons with the Echoes is they're making it so that it can be enabled that it listens for a few seconds after responding to a command. So if you end up asking it a question, it'll listen, and if you ask it another question, it will respond. You can stop this listening by saying thank you, stop, cancel, or go to sleep. So they're definitely trying to make it a little more interactive so you don't have to say Alexa every 10 seconds for until you're done the conversation.
What if you're just yelling no?
Well, as we found out when I called Chris accidentally a while back, it doesn't really work so hot.
At 12:30 in the morning, my time.
Yeah, I did that. For those of you who didn't hear that episode, totally accidentally called Chris in the middle of the night.
It wasn't accidentally.
Yeah.
There was no accident.
It's true.
Both of you, though, Chris and SP, are pretty big Alexa users. You had them long before I did. Does this sound like this is going to help you be a little more interactive with it, or what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, it definitely will. I just turned on the feature on, you have to go in each one in settings, which is a pain in the butt for all of your Echo devices. So I turned on the one in the basement probably 10 minutes before we started recording this episode, and it does make a difference to be able to ask her to do something and then not have to immediately follow up by saying, hey, A-word, do this now. Now you can just, as long as the ring is on, keep telling her to do stuff. And it's quite convenient, especially for controlling lights in my house or controlling the TV and things like that. I love it.
Well, and also for stuff like where like me and my wife are going through the pantry and making a shopping list, and we're using the assistant to, add this to the shopping list, and then saying, hey, gee, add this to the shopping list, and then, hey, add this to the shopping list. And it's like you get into a rhythm doing it, but it's like, if I could just string those all together, one command after another, that would be a lot more useful.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
When you're in a skill for the Amazon device, you can do that already. You can go through it like the Mars Curiosity NASA skill. You can actually just continue a conversation. But other just normal apps, you have to initiate the command. It is a pain. So it would be better to have a communication like a normal conversation, but at the same time, it would be really creepy right now, at least to me, like it isn't already, to have it on all the time and just have a conversation, and all of a sudden it would pop into the conversation, kind of like the laugh thing earlier. So
that's not how it works, though. I mean, it pretty much gives you about 3 seconds after it finishes talking to you where you can issue a command, and if you say nothing, then it turns off. So basically, it keeps listening after it talks to you for a few seconds. That's the behavior it has now.
See, that's probably the best middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
Between listening all the time and having to repeat that starter command every time.
Wait a minute. So are you saying the commands are different in Middle Earth? Because you said middle ground. So does the Amazon or Google Home Assistant device exist in Middle Earth, and do they operate differently?
Mm-hmm. You can say, hey, Galadriel, and it'll totally pick up what elven spell you want to cast.
I like it.
I don't get it. By the way, before we get off of this point here, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this feature is not available in Canada. So those of you Canadians checking it out know that you should have picked up a Google Home instead, because Google Home is doing a far better job with Canadians than Amazon. And I love my Amazon, love the smart integration. That's why I chose it. But yeah, Amazon's been letting me down as far as Canadian features go. We just got the voice recognition. Ridiculous.
You say that now. I wonder what it's going to be in a year. I wonder what it's going to be in 2 years. I wonder what it's going to be like in 5 years. So now, okay, Google's ahead in Canada, but I don't know. Another year, another 6 months, another 24 months might be a completely different ball game.
Maybe. All right, speaking of other ball games, there's a new ball game in town for Nintendo, right? Or Chris?
Yes.
That was an awesome segue. You know it.
Worst segue ever.
None of the stuff I'm going to talk about is ball games. It's just games. There's a new game in town, perhaps, that you could have found out about during Nintendo Direct 2018, which took place last week. That's the opportunity for Nintendo to highlight some of the biggest things that will be coming in this upcoming calendar year. There's 5 things I wanted to touch on real quick. We're going to save the biggest story for last, but a story that kind of entertains me and has me excited is there's a game called Splatoon 2 that I play on my Switch a lot. It's a shooter, but it's a kiddified shooter, but not in a bad way, where basically you play as what are called inklings that are like squid children, and your goal is to cover the map in ink. And whichever team can cover the map the most in ink wins when it's all said and done. It's a really fun game. It's mostly online. There's sort of a single player setting. Well, they did announce that there is a single player expansion coming to Splatoon 2. It'll cost $19.99. It's called Octo, and it features a special agent Octoling who's unraveling the mysteries of Inkopolis, which is the city in which the story and the game all takes place. It looks like it could be cool. The bigger thing here is Nintendo finally dabbling in downloadable content and expansions. They did a little bit with the Wii U, and we saw Zelda expansions for Breath of the Wild, but a lot of folks figured out it just might be a one-off. Well, it looks like Nintendo's starting to jump in and give you new campaign level missions as DLC. And I have my issues with DLC, but if you're going to give me more story missions that are pretty meaty, I'm okay with it. So depending on how well this DLC plays, kudos to you, Nintendo, for giving me more gameplay in a game that I've come to love.
I don't have a Nintendo Switch, or I don't have any Nintendo products other than the classics. So I will live vicariously through you.
That works. And I will say Splatoon 2 is a really fun game to play. And it's one that plays nice mobile as long as you are connected to the internet. So a lot of people have been using their cell phones as hotspots and playing that way because it doesn't have very strict requirements for the connection it needs. You can have a pretty crappy connection and still be able to play. It's become a pretty fun one. But I've got tons more Nintendo news, guys. There are new ports coming to the Switch. You guys might have noticed there's been a lot of ports of Android games and Wii U games coming. Well, they did announce...
Like port 80, or is it the port 21? What port are we talking about?
Port 80. They want to go on the internet.
This mistimed TCP joke brought to you by Steven.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So some of the games that are ported games, meaning they were originally on other systems and are now coming to the Switch that you can buy digitally, and presumably some of these as cartridges, include the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, which just came out recently, which is a collection of the old Crash Bandicoot games. Okami HD is getting an HD upgrade for Nintendo Switch, which I know a lot of people love that game. And a Steam favorite, Undertale, which is a very Nintendo-inspired RPG, will also be coming to the Switch. My co-host on All Things Good and Dirty, Naki, is a huge fan of Undertale. There's so many different ways you can play the game, and right now she's trying to play the game on a playthrough where she doesn't kill anyone. So that's been one of the interesting twists on that. Undertale is a great game. It will make sense on the Switch because the nice thing about the Switch is just pick it up and walk around with it. Take it with you when you're going out to run errands. The wife's looking at stuff at the store, you don't care, go plop down on a chair, play some Undertale or something like that. So lots of ports coming, and these are some of the big ones. I'm kind of excited.
Man, I am so just right on the edge of getting a Switch.
Really? You don't have one already?
No, and I keep asking myself why. Because it seems like the first console in a long time that I've actually, from Nintendo, that I've actually really been interested in, because honestly, I don't need a Wii U strapped to my TV. I've got an Xbox, and the exclusives aren't really. But the Switch with the way that you've got the TV and the mobile, and they just keep coming out with interesting stuff. I really am starting to try to come up with some cash to.
Well, I mean, and let's be honest, the Nintendo games that come out direct to Switch are pretty sweet. Zelda Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game. Mario Odyssey is one of the best Mario games in recent years. Mario Kart might be an upgrade of what came out on the Wii U, but it's still a solid game. There are Nintendo first-party games that are awesome, and there's new ones coming, like a new Metroid. The rumors are Skyward Sword's going to come out on there as an upgrade for Zelda. There's just so much stuff coming. Nintendo is raking in money hand over fist. The Switch has been a bigger success than anyone thought, and kudos to them for keeping the games coming.
Okay, so before we move off of Chris's news point, I need to do fellow Gonna Geek Network member, what's their name? Beef Stew. Oh, Digital Soup. Sorry, Digital Soup. I got to give them a little shout out here. And a while ago, they ended up putting a poll of Sega Genesis versus SNES, and I was pretty vocal and quite honestly had a lot of support on my side in the social media realm for the SNES being a better system. But in all fairness, I will even the playing field. Growing up, my brother David here was indeed a Sega fan. He had the Sega. I still think SNES was better. It had Mario Kart. It had all of the retro Mario games. It had Mario World. It had Star Fox. But I will let you defend Sega.
I'm sorry, you haven't listed the game you played the most on the SNES.
Which one was that?
Mario Paint.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. When I said Mario Kart, I meant to say Mario Paint, because I actually argued that on social media as well. Mario Paint was awesome. You could make music.
Yeah, that was a great, fun game. Plus, it came with a mouse, which was really cool.
Yeah, it was. My sister, it came with this plastic mouse pad, and my sister broke it like the first day she stood on it.
I remember that.
Yeah, correct. But no, David, you had a Sega, and you thought the Sega was better, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge fan of the classic Sonic games, not any of the 3D ones or however terrible that branched down. But I do know that, I mean, we had both, but when it came time for us to play a video game on New Year's Eve, I know we booted up the Genesis with NBA Hang Time.
That's what it was.
We were all playing it.
Nice.
Like, and I don't know, the maybe the simplicity of the controller, or just, I don't know. It was a lot of fun, and I have some really good memories of it. I don't know if I could really say hands down that the Genesis was better than the SNES, but
yes.
I'm not saying I'm not saying the opposite either.
I'll take it. It's a win. Okay, you hear that, Digital Soup? There you go. The one out of us kids that had the Genesis won't defend it.
Well, wait a minute. The Digital Soup doesn't know who David is, so we have to define who David is.
I did.
So
I introduced him.
Hold on. So Digital Soup, what you need to do is you go back to the Christmas episode, and when you see the two boys playing the video game in the Christmas episode, that's David.
Okay, fair. And you'll notice that he was holding a Super Nintendo controller. Moving on to the next news point.
No, I didn't get to the biggest piece yet.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I saved the best piece for last. This is the way to convince any holdouts they need to get a Nintendo Switch. David, I'm talking to you right here. I'm talking to you.
Me.
One of the best games of all time for Nintendo in recent memory, starting with the N64, Super Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers confirmed 2018 for Nintendo Switch. Yes. One of the best fighting games and adventure games of all time is coming to the Switch. You know,
that
you want to play
enough
it.
to put me over the edge.
You know you want to, and they're adding new characters, including the the Inklings from Splatoon, and Link has been upgraded to look more like Link from Breath of the Wild. It would appear. We really only got like a 1.5-minute trailer saying it's coming in 2018. We know nothing else. A lot of people have dissected these videos on YouTube, literally looking at these silhouettes and shadows of characters, trying to figure out who the characters are going to be that you can play in Super Smash Brothers. But it is coming. One of the games that I have missed playing because I did not have a Wii U and I sold my Wii pretty quick into the cycle. Super Smash Brothers 2018. I want in. We all knew this game was coming. There was no way Nintendo wasn't going to do it, but it is officially happening now. Everybody buy your Switches to play Smash Brothers.
Where's David? He's left the frame. It's like he's gone to the store or something.
I'm sorry. I was off purchasing a Switch. Yeah.
Well, thank you for updating us on that there, Chris. I do not own one, but I don't know. It always seems more and more appealing.
You should get one.
All right, SP. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with SpaceX and why it's been reloaded.
So I wasn't even going to talk about this. It's not really news to me, but I had no less than 10 people approach me yesterday saying, hey, did you see the news about SpaceX? It's not really news, guys, but okay. Yeah, sure. I saw it. So Elon Musk made a surprise appearance at South by Southwest, SXSW for those that actually read it. And it was a no notice appearance, but he got on stage and he handled some questions. So I saw several different articles yesterday, because that was yesterday. I saw several different articles on it, and I'm like, there's nothing new here. And then a couple of actual industry pieces dropped today and said, yeah, it's not really news. And one of which was a space.com article that was written by Jeff Faust over on Space. He's a space news writer. And his article was entitled Elon Musk Talks SpaceX BFR Rocket for Mars at South by Southwest. So SpaceX chief executive Elon Musk said March 11th, that's yesterday, the company could begin tests of part of its Big Falcon rocket, BFR, launch system as soon as next year, reiterating a schedule he provided last month. We're making good progress on the ship and the booster, he said. That design is evolving rapidly from his presentation about the BFR concept at the International Astronautical Congress in Australia in September 2017, which itself was a revision of the design presented at the same conference a year earlier in Mexico. So yeah, folks, this is not news. This has been going on since 2016. This is old hat. Now, here's the small update. So construction on the first prototype spaceship is in progress. We're actually building that ship right now, he said. I think we'll probably be able to do short flights, short sort of up and down flights, probably sometime in the first half of next year, which would be 2019. That schedule is similar to what Musk said February 6th during a press conference at NASA's Kennedy Space Center following the successful inaugural launch of SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. Quote, if we get lucky, we'll be able to do short hopper flights with the spaceship, part of BFR, maybe next year, unquote, he said back then. Now, Musk didn't provide new testing details in a South by Southwest interview and offered a cautionary note about schedules. Quote, "People have told me that my timelines historically have been optimistic," he said. "So I'm trying to recalibrate to some degree here," unquote. That echoed his comments in Australia last year, where he described a schedule that called for the launch of the first BFR missions to Mars in 2022. So, yeah, not really news, folks, but I'm glad he spoke and said, hey, we're moving ahead. I would assume he would be moving ahead because he said he was going to. So, not really news, but I'm glad everybody else thinks it's news.
You know what I think may be the bigger news for this? It's not necessarily the specifications or anything he said. It's the fact that he was able to show up at South by Southwest, and there was the knowledge from the people that were attending that knew about this program, that are excited about this program. And it's you know, you have a guy building rockets showing up at this kind of a event, and people go nuts for it. And there's really nothing new to say. I think that's kind of an indicator that people are excited about space again after a long time of being jaded. I know that last month when I watched the Falcon Heavy launch, that I always wondered what it would be like to have witnessed the first Saturn V test. And I got that feeling that must be an equivalent. And I was very excited for the future of what this kind of development, this rapid evolutionary engineering, where every launch is getting better and better and better. And did a Falcon 9 land the other day? I didn't even know that and it's just routine at this point. And that's really the exciting part, is that it's in the focus of the average person, and it's becoming a thing again. Like we're getting space travel back, people.
Yes.
It's exciting.
True. Very true. And David, you're absolutely right. The launch parties that occur both in Houston and in Florida at the launch complex, you know, you see these large rooms with the commentators in the background go, yeah, you know, just clapping and cheering at all the stages of these experimental launches. Yeah, I totally get that. And it's great to have this in the vernacular again and in the foresight of, and if you thought that the Falcon Heavy was exciting, just wait until you see the BFR go up for the first time. Wait until you see the SLS go up, which is what NASA is funding for their big rocket. Those are Saturn V genre rockets. Those have the Saturn V capability. It's going to be awesome seeing those go up again, because it's a whole nother class of rocket. It's a whole nother class of thrust. If you have a chance to go see a BFR launch or an SLS launch, I wholeheartedly say get your butt down to Florida and see these things go off. It is going to be a sight to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I will say this, that I agree totally with what David said, and that's been one of my most exciting moments here from everything that's come out in the last couple of years, is people are talking, just mainstream's talking, and that's fantastic. That's awesome.
Good enough.
You know what's not talking, though, is Skype Classic, right, David?
Apparently. Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, I went to start up my machine, and my system's the SSD drive died. And just completely wouldn't power on at all. So I started from scratch. So when Steven invited me onto the podcast, I'm like, okay, well, I just reinstalled Windows 10. Let me go find all the software for my audio interface and for my everything else. And for, I got to install Skype. So let me go try to download Skype. Okay, it's asking for the Windows 10 version, that kind of half-assed version. Okay, I'm sure there's another way around this. I'm sure I could find the Windows 7 download, and I know that'll work. Nope. It's just gone. And the only thing I could find is like a couple of vague articles of Microsoft going, there's security flaws we're not going to fix in it. We're just not going to make it available anymore. You're on your own.
Yeah. Now, when you send this to me, I actually turned around and sent it in a group chat that we've got with Chris, SP, myself, and Suncast. And I'm like, I don't know how I missed this. And Suncast goes, you didn't. I sent it to you. And all three of us apparently missed it in the context of the conversation, because, yeah, this was a few weeks ago. And it's pretty big, because a lot of people who have tried the app version of Skype know that, as you said, it is half-assed compared to the full classic version. So if you have the classic installer, number one, make sure to tell us so that we can get a copy of it. Number two, just know that you probably want to hold on to that for a while longer, because there's been some chatter that Skype has started to back away a little bit from the direction they started about 6 months ago. So they're realigning, and who knows how long that'll take them to bring back the desktop version, because they started to go the social route and apparently it's not working so well. So there is some chatter that they might be trying to back off from that. In any case, I will say that I think if you just copy the directory, it works.
It does. But one thing that's very interesting about that new version, and it seems like there's two. There's like the Windows Store version, and then there's a UWP version, and both only work off of Media Foundation drivers. So if you're a podcaster, stuff like XSplit, which is based on old Direct Show stuff and other libraries, they're not supported and they don't show up in the camera lists.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, no, it's Media Foundation, which is that Windows 10 standard or Windows 8.1 or whatever the hell it was. It's just the new stuff, and that's it.
That's actually in the chat. We have listener viewer Albert Sims saying that he tried the new Skype and that it wouldn't find webcam max, and the classic version does. So it's probably that.
I would say to him that it's not supported and it's not planned on being supported, as far as I could see.
Yeah, we all want to get away from Skype, and we keep failing miserably at it. So yeah,
I could only imagine though that XSplit will release an update at some point and, rewrite their output for Media Foundation. Maybe not. I don't know how complicated it is. I don't do programming on that kind of stuff. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad you were able to somehow get classic version so you could be on here.
Yeah, somehow it all just worked out.
Somehow. And finally, in our extra news section here, a couple of quick picks that we've got. Number one, I'll just go ahead and mention that apparently, if you want to see funky Netflix categories, you can do that. I read this article on teenvogue.com. Yeah. And apparently, what? I know.
No. The real news here is, what are you doing on teenvogue.com?
Okay, so it showed up in the Google News feed. So, and then I was just like, I'm not going to look for another source here. But there is, if you search, you know how there's the Google or the Netflix categories? What there is there's a whole bunch of code numbers. So if you want to go dive into some of these extra categories, there's a bunch of stuff's indexed. There's a way to do that. You have to do it from like a web browser, but it's kind of cool if you want to see some unique genres. So that's making the waves right now. And then also, finally in our extra, we've got that Apple is updating their logos. Yeah, apparently Apple is updating their made for iPhone logo, and that's news because it's Apple.
So did you get that article off of like 17.com or?
This was glamour.com.
Oh, okay. Is Teen Beat magazine a thing?
Teen Beat magazine.
I think I should just do that. We should do an episode where everything comes from teen magazine websites, all of them.
Tech news from a teen perspective. There's the first podcast with your kid when he grows up.
Exactly. Of course, the podcast will be presented by a bunch of old guys like us. So
isn't that the first podcast that your sons are going to do with their uncle?
Exactly. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to another segment that we've got. Here we go. All right, this one's a bit fun for me. This is technically a version of Steven's geeky stuff, but it all stems from a recent birthday present that I got. Now, this was quite a surprise for me, this birthday present that I have. And speaking of surprises, SP and Chris actually have no idea what I'm about to talk about today in Steven's geeky stuff.
Is that your Speedo?
It is my Speedo, yes.
God,
yes.
I hope not.
No, but this birthday gift that I got, it's a one-of-a-kind product, and it is very, very geeky. Now, I ended up being gifted this box, and when I opened it, I was like, "Oh, there's foam in here. What is it in this?" And I was very, very, very surprised. Now, I'm going to go ahead and visually show some things in this segment today. So for you audio listeners, we're going to do our best to describe them, but this was something that I could not, I had to make sure to debut it on the Gonna Geek show, and it's going to be somewhat visual. So this is what I got for my birthday. It is a one-of-a-kind original microphone flag. And if you're not familiar with a microphone flag is often the little cube that you see on microphones. And they usually end up having like some form of labels. If you've ever watched any of our shows, you'll often see that they've got like just a square with a printing of the logo. Well, my microphone flag that I got in this awesome case lights up. And it is custom printed in a 3D printer to have the Gonna Geek logo. Now, we have a certain guest here today, and you'll notice I didn't mention that he had no idea what was going on because it was David that actually printed it. For those of you who are watching the video side of things, you may have noticed over his left shoulder is, in the background, a 3D printer, and David has been experimenting with 3D printing. This microphone flag is awesome because it has the capability of adjusting light, so I can dim it or I can make it brighter, however I want to do it, and it has a couple of switches, one of which makes it so that it actually flashes the little waves on the Gonna Geek logo. So if you've ever seen the Gonna Geek logo, there's little radio waves around the tower. This actually cycles through. So I wanted to bring David on here so he could talk about how he made this and also talk, well, and of course it would be fun to have him on here, but talk a little bit about his experience so far with the 3D printer because you've only had it for a few months now, right?
Only a couple months, actually. I got it in the middle of January. I ordered it as kind of a Christmas present to myself. And other than a few upgrades that I printed to it, the first project I started in on was this birthday gift for Steve here. So few different levels from concept to assembly here. First of all, with the 3D printer, as a quick rundown, a 3D printer takes filament, which comes on large spools. It melts it, and it drops, and it basically squeezes it out onto a bed of material. And then it moves up a little bit, and then prints another layer, and then prints another layer, and you effectively print, layer by layer, your entire object. So I figured, well, okay, there's a lot of stuff on like websites called like Thingiverse where you can just pre-assemble, you know, so people have designed stuff like this is like a little test cube for figuring out if my dimensional accuracy is correct on the printer, or even larger things like this, which is a case to put all the electronics in the side of my 3D printer. The kit one I got is kind of a kit where you build it piece by piece.
And for the audio listeners, what he was just holding up was a device that is I don't know, how would you describe the shape of that?
It's basically a trapezoid box with hex vent holes out the side and a bunch of mounting pegs to attach like the printer control board, a Raspberry Pi, a voltage regulator, and a relay switch so that you can basically remote control the 3D printer and bundle all the electronics up into a case to kind of keep it off of the desk and to stop it from snagging on itself, that kind of thing. And so all of those kind of designs are available on the web for free. But when it comes to something like the Gonna Geek mic flag, you're starting from scratch. So what I started actually in on was I downloaded Fusion 360, which is a 3D design software, and it's actually free for hobbyists. And I designed the Gonna Geek.
That's so cool.
Logo into a mic flag. I basically measured what a mic flag that I had, figured out the dimensions. And what this is you basically can draw sketches, which are single plane drawings, and then extrude up through the third dimension to draw basically 3D shapes. So if I'm taking a look here, I can take off the top of the mic flag, and I'll just take off some other pieces of it here and spin it around, and you can see that on the inside I've basically designed a hollow enclosure for for these basically lit lenses to go into, which I also 3D printed with 3D filament that is clear, and basically walked through it piece by piece, designing it. And once that's designed, you put it into the 3D printer software and send it to your 3D printer and print it off piece by piece. And that's how I got the physical object. So there was a lot of iterations. A lot of iterations of I printed basic shapes. Actually, Steve's got some of the test ones that I did. And like that's an early test there. And if you look at what Steve's holding up, you can tell that it's more accurate to the Gonna Geek logo, but like the antenna waves are too small for being in physical reality of a mic flag. So I took some artistic license, made those bigger, reprinted it again, and basically printed all the pieces, fit them together, make sure everything worked, and then did a final print in black material called PETG, which stands for something that I don't remember right now.
Hey, you know how to use it. That's what matters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a printer that uses multiple filaments, like you can do multiple colored objects?
Not at the moment. No, you can do upgrades to basically add that feature, but the one that I have is called the Onet A8, which is only a couple $100. It's very kit. Like you build it. Mm-hmm. If you look over my shoulder, you build it piece by piece, and it's got a fairly cheap acrylic frame, so you have to print some upgrades to stabilize it a bit, and you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Like the extruder that I have is an upgraded version where you're taking the stepper motor off of the gantry that moves around and putting it up on the side. So that way there's less weight moving around when the head's printing. So there's less wobble, and the end result is you wind up with better prints. And there's a lot of, you can kind of do a lot of printing to the print for the printer itself, almost as a hobby in itself. Like it kind of bootstraps itself to be a better printer in the long run. But really, the sky's the limit. There are kits that you can get that it's just basically 1 or 2 screws. You put it upright, and for $700 or $800, you have a fully working, fully calibrated 3D printer if you want.
I know the first thing that a bunch of guys at work had to print off was a type of spooling device, because they all like did it out of a dowel or something that's hung up above it. But then you can print out a more quality spooler that then enables the filament to come down at the right angle, at the right rate.
If you look at the picture that Steve's put up on the screen there, you can see that I did a couple of adapters there on the spool there. You see the kind of orange cross to the side of the spool, and it's basically a spool adapter with a bearing in it so that there's not friction when it spins the spool when it's pulling more material.
That's so cool. Did you print that Logitech C920 that's off to the side?
For you audio listeners, you really should, if you get a chance, go over to geeks.link/231. I'm going to dump a bunch of photos in there so that people can have a look afterwards if you want, and maybe understand a little bit better about what we're talking about. But it's quite cool because when David first told me he was getting this, he was telling me about all these things he was going to do to basically modify the 3D printer. And some of these photos that he's got already, you can see the different elements that the 3D printer is actually using that it printed. It's so cool that it's been expanded by itself.
So what is the effective print area? Is it 8 because it's an A8? Is it 8 inches?
No. Well, actually, I'm not sure. It's about right, actually. It's 220 millimeters by 220 millimeters by 240 millimeters. So I think that's about 8.5 inches in each direction. My metric to Imperial skills are pretty sad.
So let's talk a little bit about the flag again. So the flag itself has pulsing pattern. It's got lights. It's got 2 switches and 1 dial. How exactly does it all work, technically speaking?
What I did is I picked up an Arduino. And for those who don't know what an Arduino is, it is basically a glorified microcontroller with a bunch of pre-built inputs and outputs, analog ability to read, like analog digital converters and that kind of stuff, all packaged up in a uniform piece of hardware, which is open source, which means that there's a lot of free and very well-built clones out there that aren't necessarily Arduino branded. And the other side of that is that it also includes a programming language which has all of the low-level electronics dealt with. So you are dealing in a kind of a pseudo language when you're programming this thing, where you're not having to really read voltage levels or anything. You just say, if this pin is high, do this. If this pin is low, do that. So what I did is I wired one pin to the knob, to the analog knob, and I had it's basically a potentiometer, and it says read this value, and those values are between 0 and 1023. And based on that, it decides what brightness to put the lights at, so that there's a loop in the program that runs every, few milliseconds that reads that value and updates the lights on the power being sent to the LEDs. And I set another pin to have that toggle switch that turns the blinky on and off. And I said, if that pin is high, do the blinky. And if that pin is low, don't do the blinky. So the code really is not all that difficult. It's basically just one section where you're saying what pins you're using. You're setting up the pins to input and output. And then you're just running a loop that says, read the knob, read the buttons, and right out to the lights, and that's it.
Yep. I had to play with something similar in college, actually. In one of my computer engineering courses, we had Freescale microprocessors that we could put on the breadboard, program, and wire up into things, and we made all sorts of weird little programs with it. I think one time we made like digital music synthesizer and keyboards and stuff like that, and this is prior to the Arduinos and the Raspberry Pis and the like that, but it was pretty powerful at the time, and for like it was $60 to get the kit for that CPE lab. It was an awesome little tool. So yeah, those things are really neat.
One of the ways I got started, I picked up a kit, which comes with an Arduino, and it comes with a bunch of wires and a breadboard and a bunch of LEDs. And I just basically played around with it and trying out the code. You upload your code updates via USB, and I basically iterated it until I figured out which would work. You can see in this picture, I was deciding between blue and white lights, and the white lights wind up working better. Honestly, it came together fairly easily. The kit that I got, which I think is just one of these Arduino kits based off on Amazon, like the one that I got is the S26 from Samraza.
Samraza. I know Samraza. That's a good company.
Yeah,
Samraza,
right?
yeah.
And when I went to build it, I basically bought one of a $5 equivalents of the big Arduino as a little tiny one, which just basically you solder the voltage and the grounds and the lights and the switches all directly to it instead of it being in kind of a breadboard form. I packaged it all up, gave him a few 9-volt batteries to power it, and put it in a box.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I've got a few 9-volt batteries, and I wanted to mention something that I thought was such a cool way of developing this. For those of you who haven't been watching the pictures, there's essentially the version that he first did, or some of the versions that he did, was on this orange plastic as he was figuring things out and whatnot, and was making different revisions. And then eventually it got to a black plastic. And during one of the steps there where the switches, there's, as I mentioned, those switches, David ended up drilling holes in that would be the proper size for those switches to fit. Well, then when it came to the next revision, he simply measured how big those holes were and added them to the 3D print. So then he didn't have to drill it the next time. I'm like, genius, right? Well, why do manual labor when you can just modify the design?
Well, and that's one thing I would say is anybody wanting to give this a shot. I mean, a lot of the tools are fairly free. You just need a little bit of material, but definitely invest in a set of digital calipers. So that way you, like, if you're doing stuff like this, it was just so easy to just pop the calipers into that hole, went, okay, so the hole's that size. How far is it from one side? How far is it from the other? Punched it into the sketch, extruded a hole through the design that I had, and then it was done, and it was ready when I printed the final version. I didn't have to worry that, oh, am I going to drill this too far to one side and have to print it again? No, I'm just done.
Yeah, it's
cool.
Really cool.
Yeah. That's what the
it's
pros
awesome.
do with professional CNC machines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and actually, the 3D printers, when you design something to print, it does put it into G code, which is kind of what a lot of CNC machines use. It's just specialized for extruder moves instead of, whatever your laser cutter or whatever or the jet that you're using, right?
Yep.
So what's been the biggest learning experience from getting into the 3D? And also, can you talk a little bit about your safeguards that you've got?
I would say it's probably the 3D design, because I was so rusty at it. I mean, I kind of had to pick up soldering again, obviously, and some of the electronics work was new to me, but all of that was fairly easy because, the kit already comes with a disc with a bunch of examples on here's how you get started, here's how you code an LED circuit, here's how you code a switch and all that. So the 3D software, I would say Fusion 360 is probably not the easiest to learn on, because it's very strict about doing, constrained sketches and, and basically doing it the right way up front. But I did take the time, figured out what I was doing wrong, learned from it. And the end result is that I have a very good workable model out the end of it, so that if come to the end of the line that I need to do an update to it, or it gets broken, or I need to alter a piece of it, like it gets a new mic stand and then the hole in the middle doesn't fit, I can very easily just adjust my sketch and do it. But there's a lot of upfront work to that.
Oh, no doubt.
As for the safety concerns, I put a smoke detector in my closet. I basically hollowed out my closet in my office here that I use for work, and made a little mini makerspace. I put a desk in there, ran power and network to it, installed some lighting. But one of the most important things is the smoke detector and the fire extinguisher, which is an ABC fire extinguisher, to make sure that if I do have an electrical fire or filament fire or whatever else is going to catch on fire in there, that, because I mean, the material does heat up to like 200 Celsius when it prints. So, you don't want to screw around with that. Yeah, there's a shot. I've got the Nest Protect sitting in there, and that's networked to the one that I have out in the hall. So if it goes off, I'm going to hear it throughout the house.
Yep, I have the same ones in my house.
Yeah, they're great. Honestly, that's how I wound up with the Google Home Minis, is I had the Christmas promotion where they included them with the
Nice.
with that. So I also specifically with the Onet A8, I printed and printed some upgrades and bought some electronics to make it safer. Some of the base designs of this printer, because it's so cheap, means that it's running a lot of high voltage through its main control board, through connectors that aren't necessarily 100% rated for that type of amperage, especially with the heated beds. So there's some upgrades that they recommend doing, like running the heated bed through what's called a MOSFET, which basically runs the power through a separate board, and the 3D printer controller only just turns it on and off. So that way you get a much better connection. The connectors are a lot higher quality, upgraded some of the wiring, just basic. And honestly, a lot of my resource came from just Googling Onet A8 safety upgrades. And there's a few really comprehensive websites that all say the same thing, and that if you're going to do this printer, do upgrades 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because you do not want to screw around with it. Yeah, see there, that's a shot of me printing the top of the mic flag there. One of the benefits of putting the Raspberry Pi on the 3D printer is that you can have that C920 record time-lapse videos for your printing.
That's cool.
But what's even more useful than the time-lapse videos is that also lets me monitor it from another room.
That's probably
it'll
the
let me
more
live
important
stream
thing.
it. Yeah. So if we're sitting on the couch watching a movie and I've got something printing down here, I can just have the phone open and I can see that, yes, it's still printing. No, the print hasn't come off the bed and is skidding around and is slowly heating up because it's all stuck to the hot end, or, any one of a dozen things. The software that I installed on the 3D printer itself, there's an upgrade that does thermal runaway protection. So if it thinks it's on fire, it stops. And some of that is because I went with the cheap end, but the cool thing about going with the cheap end is you learn everything about how a 3D printer works. Whereas I think if I had spent a few $100s more and got a kit, I might be a little scared of messing with it and not really understand all how it works. And I mean, look at the mic flag. I'm the type of guy that likes to tear things apart and build things. So, that's the way I chose to go. And I've been pretty happy with it so far.
What's the longest print that you've accomplished so far in terms of time?
That's this. This took 16 hours to print.
That's the thing you described earlier. The what's it called again?
This is audio podcast. This is the electronics case for the side of the Onnet A8 that holds the controller and the Raspberry Pi, and basically because it has such a large size, for one, it's almost the entire width of the printed surface. And the detail on the hex holes on the side means that it has to do a lot of slow motions where it's moving, printing a little bit, moving, printing a little bit. It's not doing long, smooth printing. So you wind up increasing the time it takes to print something like this. If this was solid on the side, I would guess it would probably take a little bit less time because the design's not as complex. So, it's the trade-off. I've seen designs for versions of this that take another 10 hours.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Just because they're doing something different with the standoffs, or it's got different size dividers, or it's including more in the same box.
Just like model kits, though, you can actually print little stabilization sacrificial pieces that you would cut off after the piece is made, just to make sure it's stable during printing.
Yeah. It's called supports. We're looking at the front of the mic flag here, where it's basically the layer mode, where you can see all the different layers that it's going to print. And if I swing around to the back, the blue material you see here that's kind of waffling back and forth behind the Gonna Geek logo as I go up, it is putting in support material for these little baffles that I put in to kind of block the light between the different lenses. So what you can do is you can change that value of what angle of overhang is supported. And so if I were to put it down, to 50 degrees instead of 86, it'll re-render it. And then suddenly it's going to put support material in the antenna, in kind of all the different logo areas, and try to support a little bit more. So you can kind of tweak all of that setup to, if you have a really complicated print that, if you don't have the support material, it's just going to print in thin air. Obviously that's not going to work because it's just going to droop and fall over. You can really dial in what the support material is, and the software includes gaps, so that when this is done, I basically just grabbed it with a piece of pliers and yanked it out. And it just fell away. But it was enough to hold it up while it was printing until the material had cooled.
That's cool.
And so what's your experience been with the support material and whether or not there's stringiness and things like that? How's that gone?
It really depends on the type of material that you're using. The reason I do a lot of the stuff in orange is the orange that I have is what's called PLA plastic. And it prints at a lower temperature. It doesn't require as much of a heated bed that it's printing onto, and it is less stringy than what I wound up printing, the black material, which is called PETG. The PETG is a lot stringier, and you have to print it at a higher temperature, which also means that, if you haven't done some of these upgrades to the power supply or the MOSFET upgrade, then the printer's really going to struggle to keep up. It's back in the day, a lot of people would use ABS plastic for a lot of this, but that not so much anymore from what I've been looking into, because, you need the whole the whole environment needs to be warm. So you have to kind of create an enclosure around it. It has a lot of fumes when it heats up. The good thing about PLA is PLA isn't really harmful. It makes a little bit of like a popcorn odor. The PETG is odorless and fumeless. Like it's a lot safer. I would prefer to print in PETG if at all possible for most of my stuff, but I wind up printing in PLA when I'm doing testing and I want something quick, because I know even if my design's bad, it's probably still going to print, and I can dial it in before I print something, if I'm doing something like the Gonna Geek flag and need to print a higher quality version of it.
And finally, before we get off of this, in the chat, we had Guest 68 say, did you do any finishing, or was it just that smooth off of the print?
This is the only finishing I did was with basically a pen knife to get rid of any kind of little scragglies that came out the sides of it. It's pretty smooth, to be honest, and that really all depends on the layer height that you're printing it at.
Right.
So you can print it in like super coarse mode, where if it's like 0.6 millimeters per layer, and that's rough. That like it doesn't hold together. It is very bumpy. It's got that kind of ribbed kind of feel to it. But when I printed the final version, I printed it at like 0.1 millimeters layer height. And what that means is the material kind of gets squeezed together a little bit more. It's going a little bit slower, and the material is basically adhering to itself a lot better. So you wind up getting that better finish. And I also spent a lot of time before I printed any of the final parts dialing in the calibration on my printer with the upgrades and making sure that anything I was printing before I printed something to give to Steve was going to be as high quality as possible.
Well, it's awesome. I was completely shocked when I ended up getting it. Again, go to geeks.link/231. There'll be a bunch of photos in there, many of which were displayed. If you watch the video side, there'll be some extra ones in there as well. But when I opened it up, I ended up just getting the box, and there was actually a piece of foam on top of it. And I went, what is this? I see 3 batteries. What's going on? And even the box was an incredible gift, because it was in foam that was all packed well. And I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. And then okay. So obviously my brother and I are both geeks, right? Yeah, there's a little bit of an obvious fact, right?
No, I never knew.
Most of the rest of our family are not geeks, but they were all over, and it was like an hour-long conversation after. Everybody was fascinated by it. So it's a great party talk too. So that's a reason in itself to get a 3D printer.
Get a 3D printer. You'll be popular. That's what I do.
So thank you very much, David, for this. It's awesome. If you do want to check it out on the video side of things, you can go to that same website, geeks.link/231. It will end up, I'm advancing us, why not? It will take you, and you'll be able to follow along on the video side if you want to go ahead and see that. Otherwise, hopefully we described it enough to interest you to head on over to geeks.link/231 and see some of the photos. And it's awesome. I'm looking forward to using it more. And best of all, it's one of a kind. So really, really cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Kind of like my 3D printed toolbox.
Exactly, which was awesome. By the way, for those of you not watching the video side of things, a couple years back, SP got a 3D printed Shield tool, Nick Fury's toolbox. If you didn't
that's cool.
Was that Shield, or was that actually in the movies? Did that make it to movies?
No,
Shield.
it was Agents of Shield.
It was okay.
with Coulson. So Nick Fury gave it to Coulson, but it was all off camera.
Yeah, that's right. So there you go. That's going to take us to the end of the show. Again, if you want to check out all the other Gonna Geek Network shows, it's at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. So for episode 231 of the official GonnaGeek.com show, I'm Stephen John Drew. I got a mic flag. I love it. It's fantastic.
I'm David. I made the mic flag.
I'm SP. I'm jealous because I'm going to need a 3D printer for extra spare drone parts.
I'm Chris, and I'm still waiting on Steven to send me more cardboard mic flags, just like the Christmas special said.
Yeah, mine's not even been used anymore. How do you like that?
Rage!
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions, which stream Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at GonnaGeek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of the Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next week.